Scotism is the name given to the philosophical and theological system, a school named after Blessed John Duns Scotus. The word comes from the name of its originator, whose Opus Oxoniense was one of the most important documents in medieval philosophy and Roman Catholic theology, defining what would later be declared the dogma of the Immaculate Conception by Pope Pius IX in his constitution Ineffabilis Deus on 8 December, 1854. Development. Scotism developed out of the old Franciscan school, which dominated theology during the Middle Ages. This school of thought initially followed Augustinism, which dominated theology at the time. Scotus found the ground already cleared for the conflict with the followers of Aquinas. He made very free use of Aristotelianism, but in its employment exercised sharp criticism, and in important points adhered to the teaching of the older Franciscan school, especially with regard to the plurality of forms or of souls, the spiritual matter of the angels and of souls, etc., wherein he energetically combated Aquinas. Scotism, or what is known as the later Franciscan school, is thus only a continuation, a further development of the older school, with a much wider, although not exclusive, acceptance of peripatetic ideas. The difference between Thomism and Scotism could be expressed by saying that, while both derive from Arabic Neoplatonized Aristotelianism, Thomism is closer to the orthodox Aristotelianism of Maimonides, Averroes and Avicenna, while Scotism reflects the Platonizing tendency going back through Avicebron, the Brethren of Purity, the Liber de Causes and Proclus to Plotinus. Concerning the relation of these schools to each other, or the relation of Scotus to Alexander of Hales and Saint Bonaventure, consult the work of the Flemish Recollect, Matthias Hauser. It is notable that, while Thomism became the official philosophy of the Church, Scotist influence prevailed on a number of important points, not least the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. Scotism and doctrinal conflicts within the Catholic Church. Nominalism is older than Scotus, but its revival in Archimism may be traced to the one-sided exaggeration of some propositions of Scotus. Scotist formalism is the direct opposite of nominalism, and the Scotists were at one with the Thomists in combating the latter. Occam himself was a bitter opponent of Scotus. The Council of Trent defined as dogma a series of doctrines especially emphasized by the Scotists. In other points the canons were intentionally so framed that they do not affect Scotism. This was also done at the Vatican Council. In the Thomistic-Molinistic controversy concerning the foreknowledge of God, predestination, the relation of grace to free will, the Scotists took little part. They either supported one of the parties or took up a middle position, rejecting both the predetermination of the Thomists and the scientia media of the Molinists. God recognizes the free future acts in his essence, and provides a free decree of his will, which does not predetermine our free will, but only accompanies it. Scotism and a Jesuit tradition. Jesuit philosophers and theologians adopted a series of the Scotist propositions. Later authorities reject in part many of these propositions, and another series of propositions was misunderstood even by Catholic theologians, and then in this false sense rightly rejected, e.g., the doctrine of the unificatio in ties, of the acceptation of the merits of Christ and man, etc. Numerous other propositions have been accepted or at least favorably treated by a large number of Catholic scholars, and amongst these are many propositions from psychology, e.g., that the powers of the soul are not merely accidents, even natural and necessary of the soul, that they are not really distinct from the substance of the soul or from one another, etc. They also took from Scotism many propositions concerning the doctrine of the angels. The influence of Scotism on philosophy and theology. Scotism exercised an influence on the development of philosophy and theology. Its importance is not, as is often asserted, purely negative, i.e., it does not consist only in the fact that it exercised a criticism on Thomas Aquinas and the Thomistic school. A comparison of the Scotist teaching with that of Aquinas has been often attempted, for example, in the above-mentioned work of Hauser at the end of the first volume, by Sanano. In many cases, the differences are mostly in the terminology, and a reconciliation is possible if one emphasizes certain parts of Scotus or Aquinas and passes over, or tones down others. However, some contradictions remain on a number of points. Generally speaking, Scotism found its supporters within the Franciscan order. Certainly opposition to the Dominicans, i.e., to Aquinas, made many members of the order disciples of Scotus. However, this does not mean that the foundation and development of Scotism is to be regarded as a product of the rivalry between the two orders. Even Aquinas at first found a few opponents in his order. Not all his fellow Dominicans followed him in every particular. The Scottish doctrines were also supported by many minorities. Furthermore, Scotism found not a few supporters among secular professors and in other religious orders, especially in England, Ireland, and Spain. Of the minorities who supported Scottish doctrine, the conventuals seem to have adhered most faithfully to Scotus, particularly at the University of Padua, where many highly esteemed teachers lectured. Scotists. Most Scotists are both philosophers and theologians. Notable Scotists of the 14th century included Antonius Andrea and Francis of Meyron, author of a Tractatus de Transcendentibus. Francis Myron, who introduced the Actus Sorbonicus into the University of Paris. 15th and 16th century. Scotists of the 15th century included two popes, Alexander V and Sixtus IV, Elector Frederick III of Saxony and Angelus of Chivasso. The latter's work on Scottish theology was so notorious that it was publicly burned by Martin Luther. Notable Scotists of the 16th century included Paul Scriptoris, noted professor at the University of Tübingen, and the Archbishop of Athens Antonio Trombetta. 17th and 18th century. Of very many names we may mention Angelo Volpsfred Summa and Comenn. Theologiae Scotii in 12 folio volumes. Luke Wadding, a well-known annalist, edited with other Irishmen in the College of Isidore at Rome the complete works of Scotus. Lambertus Lambrecht named the Viennese Scotus. Cardinal Lorenzo Brancati di Lauria, held in high favor by several popes. Francisco Macedo, a Portuguese professor at Padua, is said to have composed over 100 writings and was renowned for his public disputations. Claude Frasson was for 30 years a celebrated professor at the Sorbonne and wrote Scotus Academicus seu Universa Theo Scotti. Bartholomeus Durandus read the great Clypeus Scotisticae Theologiae. 19th century. In the 19th century, although Scotism was retained in the schools of the Franciscan order in accordance with the statutes, there were few works in the Scottish tradition, in any case no celebrated ones. 20th century. Though the use of the term Scotism has become a bit antiquated, several contemporary theologians, especially from among the Franciscan orders, like Keenan Osborne OFM and Daniel Horan OFM, can be seen as in the Scottish tradition. Several recent projects such as the Scotus Project of Cure, the International Scotistic Commission in Rome and the Commission of the Franciscan Intellectual Tradition of the English-speaking Conference of the OFM have sought to increase awareness of Duns Scotus and Scotism on contemporary theology.